All right. So the first thing is hello and what's up? It's nice to talk to a fellow editor across the pond.
Likewise. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. So tell me, first of all, a little bit about your background and how you got mixed up into editing in the first place.
Um, I always loved movies, and vaguely wanted to do something to do with them. So I got some work, and this is going way back. I got some work in a lab, and from there I went to work in neg cutting, which doesn't exist anymore. And from there I got to know editors all around London because we were doing all their neg cutting for them. So I then contacted a guy called Nicholas Wayman Harris, who's now working in LA. And I started at his company as a runner and then, assistant. And he was really good. He's a terrific editor. And he was really good because you don't tend to see it so much these days, but when he took somebody on as an assistant, you would be working with him constantly. It wouldn't be like, where you kind of just do odds and ends and then move on to somebody else's job. You were doing everything with him. So it was a really good apprenticeship.
Ask you about that. What level of responsibility do you think the editor has to offer that apprenticeship, and where's the balance between that and the assistant needing to take the initiative and look for stuff to work on?
Um, I think it's a fairly organic process. I think as you learn more from the editor, you will start picking up odds and ends of work. Ideally, you'll start getting sort of changes on commercials or little bits of because I came through sort of commercials and music video background. You'll get bits and pieces to do from that, and when it looks like you have a fairly decent reel, and when it starts paying you a little bit, that's the point where the editor should say, okay, it's time for you to sort of move on and start to, build your own client base. And then he'll kind of let you fly free and you can, he'll take somebody else on from within the company and you'll just have to kind of sink or swim. But you know when you've reached that point, and so does your boss, ideally.
Have you ever felt like an editor held you back from a potential step up?
No, never at any point. The scariest thing is always when there's competition within the company because there's a couple of other guys who've been in the same position as me and they're kind of we're all kind of all trying to make a start, but never been held back. Not by Nicholas, no.
Okay, all right.
And then from there, kind of went on to editing more and more there, pick up a few regular clients, and then kind of moved on to another company, and so on. With the intention of getting more into kind of film and drama work, I've been concentrating more and more on doing short films and eventually a feature I did a couple of years back in my own time because that's the only way to do it is to do it.
Okay, and let me ask you about, first of all, the music video world, because I've never edited a music video, and I look at them and I'm scared of them because they're really difficult.
They're really difficult. I would say they're a great training ground because they make you very self sufficient. They're very work intensive. I feel lucky in that I came from doing a lot of music videos and then doing commercials because commercials are so much easier by comparison. I mean, they have their own challenges and you have to give them as much work. But yeah, I don't do music videos anymore. And to be honest, I don't miss them. But they're a fabulous training ground because you have to do so much. It's just so labor intensive.
Now, are you pretty much always freelance?
Yes, I'm freelance now.
Okay. And do you ever work on projects from home, or you always, when you pick up something, you go to an office somewhere?
No, I work half and half really. I've got an office at home, which is set up quite nicely. So I find it's easier to do a lot of the prep work, just watching the rushes, organising, selecting, making a first edit here, and then going into whatever the client space is to present there. And yeah, and sometimes you have to go in and work on the facilities that the client has, but generally it's about half and half.
What's your feeling of work-life balance? Does it matter if you're home or away, or do you work more if you're away, for example?
No, I've got it. kind of got it fairly nicely balanced. I do like the freedom of working at home because you can stop and start when you want. I mean, I tend to wake up fairly early, and my mind's very clear at 5:30, 6 in the morning. So it's nice to be able to sit down and do something, and do like 4 hours work and know that you've done, a good chunk of the day's work, and then you can have a rest and then come back to it. It's really nice to work at home.
So sometimes by noon you feel like you've already knocked out half a day or a day's worth of work.
Sometimes, yeah, but then of course, clients tend to work on a slightly later timetable than you, so then you start getting the comments coming in, and you've had a longer day than you expected.
Yeah, yeah. That I always that's always my case. I always get the latest, the night owls. All right. Um, okay, so you have cut a lot of shorts. What would you say? Have you have you worked on a feature as an assistant out of curiosity, or any other role?
Yeah, I did. I did again with Nicholas Raymond Harris. He cut a feature that I assisted on from start to finish. That was a really good experience. I find it. Sorry, go on.
No, well, you were probably about to answer my question, which was, what's the difference between a short and a feature?
Uh, the concentration span, the amount of material that you have to. Is this as an assistant or as an editor?
Well, I would say as an editor, but the people you're talking to are a pretty mixed bag. Some have no editing experience, and some are pretty experienced, and others are like visual effects artists who are considering um, editing. So I guess, yeah, you get a pretty mixed bag of audience.
I would say that's okay. As an assistant, you have to be prepared for how long you're going to be grinding away at the same subject matter. Um, obviously, you'll have no choice in how involved you are and how much you enjoy it, but you just have to be prepared that it can take, the edit that I assisted on was 6 months, I think, and then, bits and pieces of post production after that you have to keep a handle on. And it was a really great experience because you learn so much of the entire process, and you get to learn good working methods for cutting a feature, how to organize it practically. But it can be a grind towards the end. I've always found it. I don't know if the union rules are still the same in the US, that you have to assist for so many years before you can get feature editor union membership.
Um,
That would drive me crazy.
so the rules in the U.S. are that in order to join the union, you need either 150 days as an assistant or 300 days as an editor, and that gets you on the. You can join the union with those stats, but
Oh,
then
good.
you could be promoted from assistant to editor with no number of days or weeks or years or whatever. It's funny because I actually joined as an editor, and then because that was all my work to get in, and then I became an assistant editor for about 5 years and only assisted, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. I'm just thinking back to the Thelma Schoonmaker kind of horror decade. She cut Martin Scorsese's. Well, she cut Martin Scorsese's first feature in '68, and then because of union rules, she couldn't work with him again officially till 1979, 80. That was crazy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, we don't do that anymore. Okay, the Boxer on the Wilderness. So the students that you're talking to now, in a couple of weeks, are going to be editing that project. So the question I have for you is, the first question is, um, how long did it take you to do, and what do you think is a pretty good clip if you're doing it as a side project?
It depends entirely on how much work you've got going on. I'm cutting it short at the moment, and it's quite difficult because I've been quite busy. And as a freelancer, I can't really turn away paying work, so I've been doing some weekends, and the odd day here and there during the week. So it depends entirely how much work you've got on. I had quite a lot of free time when I was doing Boxer, so let's say, working fairly solidly on it, I did my first assembly in about a week and a half, and then I got comments back from Alexandra, and then we worked on it, I think, kind of on and off for another 3 weeks or so, maybe longer.
Okay, so it took about 2 months, the whole process.
Yeah, I would say.
Okay, all right. And the cut to me when I watch it, especially now that I've seen a half a dozen other versions or more of it, the stuff that strikes me the most is um, you guys didn't go over the top with the amount of actual fighting. That you spent a lot of time in those in between moments um, at the corner of the ring. And how did you guys come up with that style, or was that you initially came up with that idea?
No, a lot of it was as shot. It was scripted. The fights weren't choreographed, so there was only. I mean, Alexandra absolutely shot the hell out of it. I mean, I was really really impressed with the rushes. I mean, it's terrific stuff to work with. Um, there wasn't a huge amount of fight footage, and it wasn't that heavily choreographed.
Right.
So we could only get so much of it together, but it was scripted to have a certain shape and a certain structure, and we just kind of stuck to that. Um, it was we did kind of stick to the script on it, so that was shot to be that way.
What about the balance of how much the protagonist is getting beat up in the first few rounds versus his comeback at the end? Where do you did you have it more equal before? Did you have where did you guys adjust that balance?
There was some back and forth over towards the end. It's been a while since I've thought about it, but we did have to adjust it slightly and try and get the balance right because he does take a beating and then only just make his comeback at the very end, and we had to get the balance just right so that it didn't look like he was. It didn't seem like too much of a robbery that he didn't get the match, that he didn't win the match. Because looking at it on points, I don't think he should have won it. He just had a big comeback at the end. We did have to go back and forth quite a bit on that and get that right. Um, I remember I got the balance wrong initially, and then we pushed it too far from Alexander's notes. And then we did have to fine tune that quite a bit.
Okay, all right. So, what about what were your thoughts, if you can remember, if you can think back to how to use that flashback footage? Um, what was your plan with it initially, and did that change?
It was very much Alexandra's plan, to be honest. I can't take too much credit for that. She had it structured the way that she wanted. My contribution was trying to make it as sharp as possible. I remember I did have to kind of tighten things up a little.
Oh,
Um,
but what I mean is the flashback footage also is sort of a little bit general coverage in the sense that you could rearrange it in any order.
yeah,
Did you have an order in mind, or you're saying Alexandra had a plan in mind that she relayed to you?
Alexandra didn't have a strict plan. I kind of got to organise it the way I wanted it and tried to, make it flow from the running to then the side of the building, boxing shots, and then try and make that flow back into the fighting. Um, I can't remember too clearly how we went about it. It was some time ago, but I just kind of tried to do it intuitively and make it flow um, based on what she planned. But I'd say trying to sharpen it up and impose a bit more structure on it.
Okay. Um, Once the film was done, did you know when you watched it, like, oh, we've got something special here?
Oh, I knew that from the first cut. Um, I'm very proud of it, and it was quite painful as well to make changes to my first cut because I thought from seeing that, as I'm sure a lot of editors will know, you can sometimes look at something and get locked into it and go, "That's it, that's the edit." And then when you start getting notes back from the director, it's you almost take offence. But I knew that it was really good from the minute I saw the rushes. I remember quite liking the script, but then as soon as I saw the footage, it was this is good stuff. This is going to be good.
And about that feeling of getting feedback, how has your feeling as an editor changed from when you first used to get feedback initially, years ago, to how you take it now?
not enough. Um, I think it depends very much on what kind of person you are. I am um, not the most adaptable person, not the most receptive person, so I have to try harder when I'm working, because that's obviously what your job is, to take on board ideas and integrate them into the film. Um, I would like to say I've gotten better at it, but probably not. I've got a difficult session ahead of me tomorrow on a short film I'm cutting now, and I'm going to have to bite my tongue a bit on that. But yeah, it depends what kind of person you are. I'd imagine some people would be better at it than others, but yeah.
All right. And what about your process of assembling the scene? Because in a normal film that has lots of dialogue and very distinct scenes and all that, you could sort of start on scene one and move to scene two. But with the boxer on the wilderness, it's a little bit more all one thing, right? So I'm one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, my approach is always the same. It's absolutely methodical. I organize, and if I have to, sync up all the rushes, organize it into scene, and then watch it through, and then trim it down and watch it through again. And it's just a constant process of honing it. And I found with this, it was much the same. You start working towards scenes and a shape and an edit from the very beginning.
So do you
Uh,
start how early on in your watching? Do you watch all the rushes first before you start cutting, or do you kind of start cutting and watch all the rushes as you're cutting?
what I do is organize it and watch it, and then I'll go through and trim out all the crap, all the NG takes, all the stuff after, before calling action and all that. And then I'll watch it again with my finger on the marker key, and I'll just mark the best takes. Perhaps put the very best take on a second video layer, so I can just grab that separately. And then once I've done that, that's the time to jump in and start building from those pieces.
So you start with putting in when you watch the rushes. The first thing you cut in is you just say like, "This shot's so beautiful, it's got to be in the movie, and it's going to fit approximately here." And then you sort of work backwards to connect the dots of all the best shots.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I will take the best takes. Obviously the best takes don't always work in the edit, but I'll take the best takes that I've marked in watching it, put those together, and then take it from there. Sometimes you have to go and get something different that's not quite as good individually, but works better in the cut. But yeah, that's it. Take the best bits, put them together, see where you go.
Okay, and this is in Premiere, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I started off in Avid, then went to Final Cut 7, and then Premiere Pro. I think I cut Boxer in Final Cut 7. It was a little while back.
Okay, we're gonna. I'm kind of in the same boat. All my sort of professional jobs are always Avid, but when I'm at home, I'm always cutting in Premiere.
Yeah.
Alexander said that this story is meant to be sort of a long trailer, that it doesn't have very clearly satisfied payoffs or setups the way that a traditional short film does. Um, how did you navigate that? Did that irk you? Or did you get it right away?
No, I have to be honest. Alexandra, she sent me the script for this, for Boxer, and I was just working purely to that. And she did tell me in conversation what the whole story of, based on a true story or based on something like a true story, what the whole story for the feature was. But I can't really remember it, and I didn't really take that on board for doing the shorts. It just had to be self-contained, so that was what I was working on. I can't really remember what the long story is. It was quite different to Boxer. There's quite a lot goes on, but yeah, I wasn't really considering that when I was cutting.
Okay, and do you have a lot? Did you have a lot of experience with sort of action movies before that?
No, not really. I mean, a lot of stuff in music videos is cutting around movement and performance. A lot of choreography stuff. All the short films I've done up to that point were quite minimal and low key about people being unhappy. So there wasn't a great deal of action involved. But I love cutting action, so it was like a genuine release, a pleasure for me to cut that boxing stuff. I really liked that.
A lot of people, including myself at times, are afraid of action because it's a little bit more Yeah, well, it's a little bit more wide open in terms of how to put it together, and it's pretty
Yeah.
montagey. And I tend to deal better with like either humor or, find the best joke is easier for me than find the best punch for some reason. But so anyway, I was going to ask you. Obviously, you're not afraid of action, but is there something that you come to that you just can't stand when you're about to edit it, but you kind of have to dig your way through it anyway? Like, are you afraid of montages or doing sound work, or is there anything that you're afraid of?
Um, Not particularly, not practically. I always find it. I always try and feel out, see what somebody's other work is like. Basically, what scares me is having an editing style imposed on me. For example, if I were cutting an action movie now, I would hate to be told that you have to cut it really, really fast and include every single angle, the way that seems to be the style now. That would worry me, the thought that you're having a particular style imposed on you, but no, not really. Um, I enjoy doing sound work. I did some quite advanced sound work on Boxer. Um,
You can feel free to
yeah,
expand on that because the sound in the boxer is very deliberate at points. He gets punched in the face and there's that flashback.
yeah,
Tell me about it. Yeah.
yeah. I did put a lot of work into that. I'm sort of an amateur musician, and I like to do a bit of sound design in films if I can. And that kind of gave me a lot of opportunities, for mood and stuff. There was some stuff that I was quite proud of. The bit where he's taking a rest between rounds, and you kind of get this muffled hissing sound of what could be the crowd or what could be his kind of his impaired hearing or whatever. That sort of thing, I'm always pleased to have a go at in an edit if I can contribute like that. That's fun.
What about music? How'd you go about picking the right music for this project?
We didn't do a great deal of work on it. I think my temp track, I'm ashamed to say, was something that everyone's used a million times. It was that Hans Zimmer piece from The Thin Red Line that's been used in 1,000 trailers, and it worked really well. But Alexandra already had a composer on board, um, so pretty quickly we got some music off him that luckily worked really well.
And did you guys do a spotting session before he wrote anything, or did he just give you some cues to start with?
I think we must have sent him a cut, and he kind of basically timed everything to that, and then we just had to adjust it slightly to compensate for edit changes in the interim. It was a fairly speedy process, and what he delivered was pretty much, fully finished.
All right. All right. Pretty straightforward. What about there's little bits of dialogue in the movie, mostly from the coach and a little bit from the referee. Any advice to someone how to use that stuff?
Yeah, dig deep. Often you won't find stuff in the specific shots that you want, but if you go through all the takes and stuff that's off camera, you might find little bits that you can use. We certainly cheated quite a bit um, in the dialogue and stuff, especially when we had the stuff, the camera was going high speed, and so we're using slow motion. We had to cheat bits from other takes to make it kind of match. Yeah, so I dig deeper into the rushes than the takes you're using.
What about how you dealt with so much slow motion, syncing it to the production audio anyway? Did you make two copies of each clip, one that was slow mo and one that was sped up to match the production audio?
The production audio wasn't really usable from what I can remember. It was there was a lot of I think there was a lot of instructions being shouted. So pretty much all of the punching and the sound was kind of added in post and in the sound design. I don't remember using a great deal of the sound from the production other than specific bits of dialogue like the count and things like that.
Did you before you sent it to Alexandra, the very first cut? Did you spend a day or some hours putting in all the punches and all that?
Yeah, yeah. I had to get as many punches as I could from my sound effects library, and then I had to, because a lot of them are if you go through a sound effects library that's quite old, like mine, a lot of them are quite ropey. So I had to kind of like slow them down and affect them and stuff like that to get a variety of punches, and then kind of added those before I sent it.
Wow, wow. And what about a music library? Do you keep a bunch of movie scores to use as like temp?
Yeah, I'm a big music fan, so I keep everything handy on a drive. I tend not to use movie scores. I'm a big fan of electronic music, so I've got a big archive of that sort of thing. So I tend to go for that more than anything.
All right, very cool. So obviously, Alexandra is a woman. Have you had a lot of female directors or female post production supervisors? I'm not sure if the equivalent is the same word in the UK, post production supervisor, but have you had many female bosses as my.
Yeah, yeah, a lot. I I've worked with a number of kind of female directors in commercials, music videos. Most of my short films have been from female directors. Amy Powell, Jane Linfoot, Alexandra, the director I'm working with tomorrow, Debbie Anzalone. So yeah, I do happen to have worked with a lot of female directors. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Um, I mention that only because in the U.S. I feel like it's a unfortunately small percentage of the directors out there are women.
I think that is true. It still seems to be the case. You know, certainly in London, there's a constant flow of new young directors, and it does seem to be the case that 80% of them are young men. Yeah, I guess I've just been lucky in that respect. But yeah, I take your point, and it is the same here. Women are very underrepresented in film.
What what advice would you give yourself? You know, if your current day self could talk to yourself when you were first getting into this industry, what advice would you give yourself?
So why didn't you start 8 years earlier? I kind of drifted and wasted a lot of time. And I was kind of doing film related stuff, but I was unfocused, and so I wish that I'd started about 8 years earlier. Um, yeah, that would be my advice. Start as early as possible. Don't put it off. The only way that you can do it is by doing it. Don't think about it and think about when the ideal time would be, or just do it.
And
I wish I'd done
what any lessons along the road that you'd like to share with these students?
it. Still on the road.
How about I'll break the question into two parts. The first part will
Okay.
be what life lesson has what life lesson has editing taught you about yourself? You know, what kind of person you are.
Um, it's taught me. God, I wouldn't say it's taught me things, but it's allowed me to channel aspects of my personality and my tastes and things that I like into work that I enjoy. That's a really great thing about being an editor. You can bring all these things to the table. Anything that you're interested in, anything that you like, your tastes, you can bring that to the table. It's also made me a far more organised person than I would have been otherwise. Um, that's a benefit for me. Um, yeah, that's all I can say, really.
Okay, no, that's terrific advice. And I was going to say the second part is, what advice would you give someone from a technical point of view in terms of their, well, I guess education in technology?
Education technology.
Do you think it's required, for example, to take a class on Premiere or to go to film school or what should they do to prepare themselves technically?
I would say get the software and start doing it, start working with it. Don't worry about what the results are, just learn to use it. In terms of film school, if you can go to a practical film school where they actually teach you to use stuff, do that. I wouldn't suggest doing what I did and going to university and doing a film history and theory course, because that's of no practical use whatsoever. I went to university and I came out and started work in a lab, and it was like, oh, I could have done this three years ago. This is, it's great because I got to see movies and I got to read books, but you can do that on your own time. Just get out there and start doing it. It's great. It's great if you know about movies and if you're intelligent and articulate about them and you understand them. That's good, but you can do that at the same time as learning, as working. Get working immediately.
Right on. Okay. Um, let's see if I have anything else. I think that's probably all I've got. Unless you'd like to add anything before we.
Yeah, I've got some really boring advice. It's the most boring thing. I mean, I'm sure this is common sense for most people, but when you get the footage, don't just jump into it. The more that you know the footage, the more times you've watched it, however excruciating that is, the better you will be able to make the cut. That's why I always say just string it together, sync it up, watch it, trim it down, watch it again, marking your selects, put those there. But you have to know all the footage. I've seen so many editors just get the rushes and jump in because they can't be bothered to watch it properly. And then when you come back and the director says, oh, well, what about this take? They've got no idea. So I would say, yeah, be boring, watch all the rushes.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.